As we edge closer to the US presidential election, which will take place in November, the record high number of illegal immigrants crossing the Mexico border into the United States will be one of the main issues on voter minds. We've heard it all before from Donald Trump that there needs to be a wall, that the policies must be stricter. But what if he's right? What if putting something so extreme in place is the only way to combat the numbers? The facts are simple. In the last 3 years, the number of migrants crossing have grown exponentially high. In 2017, the fiscal year saw nearly 527,000 migrants encountered. By 2019, that number jumped to 1.1 million, back down to nearly 647,000 in 2020. In 2021, once the Biden administration was in charge, the number grew to nearly 2 million apprehensions. In 2022, 2.7 million. And last year, in 2023, it rose to 3.2 million. 2024 has already seen 1.2 million. This means since Joe Biden has been president, nearly 7.3 million illegal immigrants have entered the country, which is about the same population size as the state of Arizona. And this figure doesn't even include the estimated 1.7 million gotaways, which is the number of illegal immigrants who have slipped through the cracks and snuck into the country. Now, whether this is the failure of the Democratic Party or just a coincidental inundation of the time, it doesn't matter. Americans want the border fixed now, ideally with bipartisan support. Here to discuss the situation with me is former Department of Homeland Security advisor Chuck Marino. Chuck, the official number is 7.2 million migrants crossing the US-Mexico border under Joe Biden's term so far. When you hear that number, as someone who has worked for the Department of Homeland Security, what do you think?
Maddie, good to be with you. That number is extraordinarily low, and it's a number that's being released by the administration after it's been vetted by the Secretary of Homeland Security. CBP's numbers actually contradict the numbers issued by the administration and show that we are easily over 10 plus million already since we've been 3 years into the Biden administration.
Well, many critics have argued the situation at the border is the Biden administration's biggest failure to date. Do you think that this record high immigration has been a failure of Joe Biden's, or is the immigration epidemic not something that you can really tie to a president?
No, unfortunately, we can tie this directly to the administration's choice to not enforce the border and immigration laws of the country, and also standing down programs that were set up by the previous administration, such as Title 42 and Remain in Mexico. Remain in Mexico specifically required people to wait within Mexico while their asylum claims were vetted. That's been abandoned, and enforcing the law is not a priority. So you have agencies like Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement that have been tasked with processing as opposed to enforcing U.S. law.
Chuck, just going back to what you were saying before, obviously the numbers that I detailed before don't actually add up to that 7.3 number that the administration is giving to the public. As you said, they do work out to be a lot more, 9 or 10 million. Does this mean that the Biden administration is effectively lying to the American public about how many illegal immigrants are crossing the border?
Yeah, again, unfortunately, the administration is going to try and paint as rosy a portrait as they can of this crisis, which they haven't acknowledged until very recently. What I can tell you is this has now climbed within the U.S. as the #1 issue for Americans related to the upcoming election in 2024. So the administration really finds themselves in trouble. As we predicted, this was easily predictable that this was going to cause problems throughout the entirety of the United States. And now they're trying to claw their way out of it.
Chuck, on a world stage level, if we had 7.3 million migrants illegally crossing into the UK via boats or via boats into Australia, where I'm obviously from, our people, our Americans, our UK citizens would be up in arms. It would be insane numbers. But in the US, this has become the norm in the last few years. What do you think this looks like for the Biden administration on a world stage level?
Well, on the world stage, it's demonstrating that this administration cannot control their borders, and it's sending a very bad national security message to the rest of the world, a bad Homeland Security message to the rest of the world. So, the administration has really done themselves a disservice as they've abandoned enforcing the laws within the country and have sowed chaos now in almost every city within the country. And these are both democratically run and Republican run cities, by the way. So now everybody is getting a taste of what the border states have historically had to deal with initially under this administration's inept policies.
Mm.
But every city is being impacted now. And of course, there's also the vetting concerns about who's actually coming into the country. And our adversaries, especially, are paying close attention to that.
Well, you worked as an advisor in the Department of Homeland Security from 2009 to 2011 under the Obama administration. How has the situation drastically changed since then?
Well, back then, we still enforced the laws under the Obama administration. Immigration advocacy groups did not view President Obama in a favorable way. They actually referred to him as the deporter in chief because of his high number of deportation and his programs like secure communities, which meant if you were in the country illegally and you committed additional crimes, you were prioritized for immediate deportation. We also believed in a layered approach to security, physical barriers, technology, and allowing the manpower, the men and women of CBP and ICE and other agencies to actually execute their authorities and enforce the laws of this country. No administration has abandoned their responsibility to secure the border like the Biden administration. That's just an indisputable fact.
Mm. Well, in 2023, going back to what you were saying before, in 2023, CBP arrested over 35,000 illegal immigrants with criminal convictions, which also included 600 gang members. Plus, there were 300 immigrants who have been on the terror watch list since 2021. How serious is the threat to national security when the US has these mass numbers either encountered by Border Patrol or slipping through the cracks?
Well, this is what really concerns national security officials within the country, including the FBI director, who has publicly stated that this is a serious concern as we deal with a heightened threat environment here in the US as it is. We face more threats from more places than at any time in our history. And the open borders aren't helping that. They're actually decreasing the safety and security of the country and the American public. So we're very concerned about the criminal elements, whether they're being released from jails in Venezuela that are making their way into the country, or other criminals with serious offenses that are being let in under this exploitation of asylum laws. And then you have the terrorist encounters, over 200. We're now approaching 300 of those on the terrorist watch list. And so the natural question, Maddie, is how many people are being let in? And unfortunately, in the United States, we've already seen several examples of people that have been let in that have later been found to be on the terrorist watch list.
Mm.
So the answer is there. Our borders are being exploited. They're being exploited by adversaries, those that don't have the best interests of our country in heart. And we're going to see the repercussions of these policies from this administration for many, many years to come, unless we fix it quickly.
And the people there who are the ones vetting are the Border Patrol agents, as well as, ranch owners who are sitting on their properties with illegal migrants camping out. These are the people that are on the front line here. Do you think that Border Patrol agents are completely run off their feet?
Well, they're certainly a demoralized agency at the moment from being prevented from doing their jobs and doing the jobs on the administrative side of processing and allowing those into the country illegally. This is not what they're there to do. They're there to enforce the law. So many of the agencies tasked with protecting the homeland are demoralized because the policies of this administration directly undercut their efforts and the reason why these agencies exist. But what I can tell you is that it's also the unknown element. We call it the unknown unknowns of exactly who's coming into this country. And those that are responsible for enforcing the laws fear that something catastrophic is going to happen in the country. And I don't think that they're too far off, unfortunately.
Chuck, obviously Donald Trump is very opinionated when it comes to the border and what needs to be done, but he did have two policies implemented that actually were working. We had the Remain in Mexico and Title 42. Now, these two policies were taken away by the Biden administration, but they were working, and the Biden administration did cop a lot of criticism for just not keeping them in. What did you think when Joe Biden took these out and the numbers kept growing?
Well, when you remove policies and programs that are working and you replace them with nothing, that sends a very clear signal to those of us in the country that practice in this area and to the rest of the world that you have no strategy. You have no plan onto how to secure the borders. And unfortunately, the administration put the politics over the national security and wanted to immediately isolate itself from the policies of the previous administration, regardless of if they were working or not. So, in the first 100 days of the Biden administration, they stood down over 90 executive orders related to immigration and border security. Almost 3.5 years in now, they've stood down almost 500 executive orders related to border and immigration security and have replaced those with nothing.
Mm.
So I think that tells the story right there. And, hope isn't a strategy. So you can't just hope as an administration that you're not letting the wrong people into the country. You actually have to have a concrete strategy, a concrete approach, and programs that work. Look, elections have consequences, Maddie, no matter the country. And this president has a right to set forth his immigration policies. What he doesn't have a right to do is to disregard existing US laws. That's not a policy decision. That's simply disregarding US laws. And it's
Mm.
not allowed. It should not be allowed.
It definitely was a case of Joe Biden's administration just trying to kind of steer their way away from Donald Trump's policies. But we've seen this all before with Trump. People just want to not be associated with him. But the facts lie in the numbers, and there was a lot less immigrants crossing the border under Donald Trump. Now, Chuck, from your experience, what do you think is the fix? Is it the wall, like Trump says? Is it better policies, stricter policies? Does there need to be less incentive for migrants to want to get asylum in the United States? Is it more communication and transparency or funding to Mexico or Central America?
Well, it's a lot, and it's a systemic approach, Maddie. First you have to have well-founded international initiatives. The Obama administration had Merida Plus. They had in the Bush administration Merida. President Clinton used NAFTA as an effort. So we have a history of administrations paying very close attention to this and working with the international community, which this administration has failed to do. Mexico is now the #1 trading partner of the United States. That's what's called leverage in negotiation. The Mexico has declined to reinstate Remain in Mexico under this administration. If former President Trump comes back in, that's one of the first moves he's going to make. And I would not be shocked if he leverages the trade relationships between the two countries. This is what's supposed to be done. As far as internally in the country, we have to start enforcing the laws on the books. We need to build more physical barriers, expand technology, and you got to allow CBP and ICE and other agencies to do their job. And then how do you get rid of all these people that have come into the country illegally? You need to reinstitute a program like Secure Communities, which is if you're in the country illegally and you commit additional crimes, you're out. You're immediately deported. And that's the way we need to, crunch these numbers down. This is going to be no easy task. There's not going to be a mass deportation effort, for example, with the military. You're not going to see that. What you got to do is leverage the 800,000 law enforcement officers throughout the United States. And as they encounter those in the country illegally that are committing crimes, even down to traffic offenses, you get prioritized for deportation.
Very good points from you, Chuck. We need to get you back working for the Biden administration, switch parties. Thank you to Chuck Marino. But before we go, Chuck, obviously we want to hear about your new book coming out next month.
Oh, thanks so much, Maddie. Yeah, terrorists on the border and in our country. And it takes a historical look at this crisis, how it started, what can be done to fix it, and the challenges that we have in terms of safely vetting those migrants that are coming into the country illegally and the risks that it presents to the United States.
Mm. Sounds interesting. Chuck Marino, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Maddie. Good to be with you.